What's up? Chad? Chads?
How's it going, guys? How's it going?
Chad, Cow, GM. Long time no chat. No Chad. Long time no Chad.
Welcome back, Chad.
Sorry, so my voice might sound a little off just because I've been sick lately. So if I sound weird, that's the reason why.
All good. I heard the intro music got a refresh too. That was chill. I was feeling that.
Yeah, it was pretty slick.
Yeah, it sounds a lot better.
I
I think
I
they
was
upgraded
just
spaces a little bit. It looks a little bit more slick.
yeah, I think they've added some like at least stability. I feel like it's been a little bit more stable lately, which is good. But I noticed like in the
Weird.
title it says THORChain spaces 83. I'm like, oh my god, it's been 83 spaces, right? We've been doing this
That's
for
crazy.
years now. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's been a while. It's weird. I'm getting a glitch right now though. I can't mute myself. Weird. Now it's working. Okay. False alarm. I'm good.
We got to do something special
Yeah,
for
but
like THORChain Spaces number 100. We got to do like something interesting.
it really depends on
Yeah.
how you count it because the numbering has been a little wacky. Like it really depends on what you include. Like there might be one or two of the Discord stages included in there, and
Yeah, close enough.
others are just not included. So, but ballpark 83
Yeah,
right
that's
now.
good enough. We don't want to be exactly precise, but it would be fun to do something fun for like the 100th. Like
For sure.
we'll figure it.
We definitely should.
Maybe we could do like one like in person.
Yeah, it's funny.
Or something. I'm not sure.
It's funny. On one hand, 83 feels like a ton, but on the other hand, I feel like it feels like forever that we've done these things. So it's kind of, on one hand, it's kind of crazy. We're only at 83.
Yeah. And it's kind of funny, isn't it? Well, we do like once a week, 52 weeks in a year, blah blah blah. So
it's gonna be like Joe Rogan someday. It's like THORChain Spaces number 2083.
Oh my God, we'd all be so fucking old.
Yeah, Chad will be dead by
I'll
then.
probably be dead by then. It's a good chance of
Wow. Throw Chad under the bus, dude. He's gonna be living forever by then.
Oh God, I'll be immortalized on the blockchain.
You'll be converting Rune into like life extension drugs and stuff. Like it'll be sweet.
You put on an Apple Vision Pro and you just see Metaverse Chad there. He gets to talk to you
Yeah, well, I'll
for
upload
three
I'll
hours
upload
straight.
my Apple persona from my Apple Vision Pro, and then I'll people can talk with my face.
It's like that AI. We had this idea a while back of like the AI Chad B, like that you could just ask any question to, like, and it would be trained. It'd be trained by this space, so you'll be immortal on these spaces no matter
That's
what.
actually like
Don't worry
more
about it.
practical than you might think. You could actually take all the spaces, upload them into I forget the name of that software, but like it's like a video audio editing software, and then just converts it all into text, like audio to text. And then it separates voices by like the sound of their voice as well. You pull them all out, and then you just train a chat GPT. That's actually much more practical than it sounds.
Yeah, sounds feasible. Let's do it. Side
Yeah.
project for somebody.
Who's your cell phone carrier again? Never mind. We'll go over that later.
I think
So what's going on in THORChain land? What you guys want to talk about?
Well, there's been a couple interesting things in not THORChain land. I don't know if you guys saw those new Satoshi emails that came out. Also, there's an AVAX total block halt. So, like, those are two interesting things I was kind
Well,
of
I haven't
reading
heard
up
about the
on a little
Satoshi
bit
email
today.
thing. What's that about?
same here. What's
Uh,
that?
yeah. I mean, I've just been seeing it a little bit around on Twitter. I guess it's just a very early contributor. Just had a big archive of Satoshi emails, which are not like previously public, that are kind of out there now. It's not anything like groundbreaking, but it's a little bit more lore and like early thoughts. Pretty interesting to read through some of the emails. There's a lot of them too.
Did any
I've seen like
did
a
any
dozen at least.
points
Yeah.
did any points like stand out to you or anything memorable?
Um, Let's see. Nothing that really jumps out at me. If people like, I was like just skimming through it right before this space. But if anyone like saw anything really interesting from it, actually there was one idea about like backing Bitcoin with cash. And I was like, that okay. Obviously, that didn't pan out, but like,
That is interesting.
just some like early ideas about like
Yeah, maybe the
adoption.
other way around.
Yeah, yeah. It seems that I mean, obviously, Satoshi was a pretty smart dude and like knew a lot about bootstrapping this kind of network. I think he had his own thoughts about BTC scaling, but like you also got to take it with a grain of salt too, because he's looking at it from way back, and obviously, just one person's opinions. So
There's actually was a
kind of
guy
cool though.
a long time ago, and people this is even before that I was in crypto, and he was hired to create the Bitcoin logo, right? But at that time, like he didn't even know what Bitcoin was. Like just some fucking graphic they have to create. Like had no idea. And he completely forgot about it, right? He got hired, he made this fucking Bitcoin logo, completely forgot about it. And then like 5 years later, what the hell it was, Bitcoin started to be like talked about in the news. And he saw like the logo and he's like, that looks really familiar. And he ended up just like trying to claim that he invented Bitcoin years ago. It's pretty fucking hilarious. This was like, I don't know if it's like 2012 or something like this.
I guess he didn't get paid in Bitcoin, and that would have been it'd be kind of like that story of the guy who painted the murals at Facebook and ended up making like $200 million off of painting like murals at the Facebook headquarters
Yeah.
or something like that.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Assuming he did not get anything for making the Bitcoin logo.
Yeah. The AVAX halt is just something that's, obviously interesting just because they've normally been a very stable chain. Haven't had like a lot of issues in terms of like halts or like major issues. So It's interesting that they ran into their issue, and of course that affects us. And this is the ongoing cost of like as we add more chains, whatever shit they're going through, it kind of like splashes on us in some form because it causes us to react and pause trading or something like this, and like deal with any kind of transaction to get stuck or anything like that. Just causes like maintenance issues for us as well.
Yeah, it looks like they fixed it though, and I think we unpaused signing. So I'm not sure if trading is back up online just yet, but they're pretty quick on the response. And it looks like it was some kind of issue where their AVAX nodes were like gossiping way too much. They were sending like millions of messages back and forth and just lagging the hell out of each other's nodes, and that kind of like brought everything to a halt. So it looks like their blocks are back up and running, and I'm not sure how long that response time was, but it was only a couple hours. Looks like.
I'd be curious to understand, like, to read the post-mortem, because generally speaking, in my view, if you have a block halt entirely, um, most of the time, not all the time, but most of the time, the longer that it takes to fix it, the more decentralized the network generally is, right? Because you have to get more people to get involved and engaged and like download this new software, blah blah blah, whatever the fix is. And if they just did it in 2 hours, that just to me that I mean I have to look at the details to be specific. I'm not making any claims about AVAX, but that at its face value, it makes me a little bit, uh, gives me a little bit of red flag.
Yeah, that kind of thing is probably hard to test. Like I'm sure they have a pretty comprehensive testing suite, but something like some kind of gossiping error, like maybe that's something that only comes up on mainnet. I mean, to be fair, like we see stuff like that, where it's like only something that you'd see on mainnet, which is why like you know we have the StageNet running and don't do testnet anymore because there's so many issues that only come up when you're actually running the network, like in
Right,
in real time at scale
right,
that wouldn't pop
but
up.
even like unless if they release some sort of bug that fixes it, it should take a long period of time for people to like install it. It shouldn't happen in like 2 hours because most people are fucking sleeping, like around the clock. So it's just like unless the issue itself is transient, like the issue is like, oh, something happened, like I don't know, some sort of network segmentation or something like this, and it's a transient problem and it's resolved itself without anybody actually, getting involved or doing any actions, then it's probably fine. I would kind of like, a non-issue. But if they did release a software update that required everybody to like download the thing and everybody did it within 2 hours, to me, I'm like, okay, that's okay.
In
That's not.
this case, though, it's still halted, right? So that's not what's happening, right?
I think
I don't know. Yeah.
didn't Cow say that they're producing blocks again?
No, they're going through blocks again. I think as of like half hour ago,
Gotcha.
maybe or an hour.
Yeah. But generally speaking, like long downtimes of a network is generally a good thing. Obviously, it's not a good thing, but it's also like a good thing signifying the decentralization of that. Like
Right.
Solana, for example, like a lot of those nodes, like totally and friends and whatever, like they have connections and relationships with people, blah blah blah, and they can like call them up on the phone and push things along. For us though, like when we push out an update, there's no one to call. We just put out a notification, and we have to wait for the rest of the world to like read it. You know.
Yeah, that's also because like as a community value the decentralization of the network and hold that above a lot of other things. Well, a lot of other and not to like say that AVAX doesn't or anything, but
Right.
like a lot of Cosmos chains, for example, like it's just not the same type of mentality. And like obviously it's needed more for THORChain because THORChain itself is as an exchange that is like it's completely different than most other networks where it's like, all right, whatever, you just trust the nodes to run it, and you could delegate your coins to whatever node that you trust. There's like 10 of them. What was that? There's like some Cosmos thread going around the other day where it's saying like how many nodes are needed to stop like each chain.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think you,
Yeah.
you could haul pretty much any Cosmos chain with like 4 or 5 validators, colluding or going offline or something. It's pretty crazy.
Right. Yeah. For us, it's significantly higher than that. I did the analysis. Actually, I have a little Python script on my laptop that I wrote just to like do a Nakamoto score like analysis of THORChain itself and figure out how many unique node operators there are, and then what percentage of those you would need to be able to stop the network, blah blah blah. It's pretty good.
Oh yeah, I haven't seen that ranking go around in quite a while, but I remember THORChain was ranked quite high. I think Solana was too, actually, but yeah, who knows if like
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
But the problem with that is like even within THORChain, like it's hard to really get a good Nakamoto score. To be not so much like it's hard to really know the quality of a Nakamoto score because even me, say I have 5 million room, for example, and I can run 5 different nodes at 5 different addresses at 5 different locations, like one in Sydney and one in New York and one in like fucking Singapore, whatever. And and then from a Nakamoto score perspective, that would be considered to be separate people, right? And that's the tough part is like even somebody that has a high score like THORChain, it's hard to know whether that score, the quality of that score, because there's no way to know if there are people running multiple nodes but as separate entities. You know what I mean?
Right, exactly. Yeah, that's like what you're saying with like totally your example. Like even if there's a whole bunch of nodes, you don't know if like multiple are run by within like one or like multiple organizations or something.
Yeah, and for us, we're actually better than most in this particular regard because the way we do Asgard sharding takes into account like you running. Say I actually have 5 nodes and I'm running all of the same address. It'll put each of my nodes in 5 different Asgards, which actually creates much more security for the network. So there is like an actual incentive for node operators to run, those who run multiple nodes at least, to run them under a single address because it actually increases the quality of the security of the network by doing so. It makes it much more expensive and difficult for somebody to Sybil attack a specific Asgard address or one Asgard vault, right? So there is an incentive in our network to not have 5 different identities for one person. That doesn't mean that nobody's doing that. Of course, I can't. I'll never be able to like validate whether that's the case. But there is an incentive to do so, and I personally have encouraged operators in the past, like publicly in channels, to like run it all underneath one address because it actually improves the security of the network.
Yeah, I was just looking at how many nodes are on the network. I think we might have just been at the most amount of nodes that have been validating THORChain blocks at 105. I think I don't know if we've ever reached greater than that, but I think just last turn we were 105. Now we're down to 104 again, but um, we were at 105, and the spread of bond between nodes is super tight too. Like the maximum is like a little over a million, and the minimum. I mean, the lowest node in has like 500K, and the second lowest is like 860.
Mm.
Pretty much, almost every single node is over 900K rune bonded. So like the spread, like there's really no real lopsided distribution of like some nodes have like a ton of rune, like some have a little. Like it really does seem like the whole um, push for like effective security and like maximum effective bond kind of it really worked to distribute things in a pretty even way
Which is
naturally.
what we wanted. That was part of the goal. We don't want we want each Asgard vault to hold the same amount of security, like give or take, right? And if you have one Asgard vault that has like 80% of the bond, then you're going to naturally overload that particular Asgard vault with too many inbounds and too many outbounds, and you're not really using the full like TSS signing of all the 5 different vaults. You're just like putting 80% of the pressure on one vault. So there's reasons why we like to have the bond be like kind of equal, relatively, like not doesn't be like exactly equal, but like within a reasonable vicinity of, and all the economics of like, all right, you're not going to make more money if you're beyond the effective bond, and you're gonna get churned out if you're the lowest bonder, and that kind of stuff, that kind of pressure from the top and the pressure from the bottom, just naturally kind of pushes people kind of towards the same place, which is what the behavior we want.
Yep, 100%. um let's see, I was also like doing some math yesterday, and I tweeted this out like a day or two ago. just about like the split between liquidity fees. Like, so when someone makes a swap and they pay fees, where does it go? I was just, trying to figure out like how much. So if there's $100 in fees, like how much do the nodes get, how much do the LPs of that pool get, and how much do the savers of that pool get? And it's actually pretty interesting. And it was less going to savers than I thought there was, which is probably which I think is like really positive. Like I think it's a good balance that we have right now for how much go towards like each different like actor in a pool. So let's say you make like a swap through the Bitcoin pool, and there's $100 you pay in liquidity fees. $32 of that goes to the nodes, so that's split between every single node of the network. $58 goes to the Bitcoin Rune LPs. So if you're a dual LP, 58% of the liquidity fees go to the Rune BTC LPs, and then $10 goes to the BTC savers. So they're earning about 6 times as much as the BTC savers. Obviously, they take on the risk, the price risk of Bitcoin. They take on the impermanent loss of those savers, but it was kind of interesting to actually like do the math and figure out like exactly how much more that they're earning than the savers. It was a much bigger difference than I would have guessed.
Yeah,
and that's at the current incentive pendulum and savers utilization ratio. Yep. But that's kind of how things break out right now.
Yeah, I just shared the tweet in the space here if anybody wants to click on and read more. But yeah, I love this tweet. Like, well done, Cow, on writing this thing, because it was a really great tweet that you put out there. And like, just my knee-jerk reaction, like, because I didn't know either. Like, you kind of informed me, which is great. And I love to see more of these kind of like data-driven tweets from the community in general. Would be awesome. But my knee-jerk reaction when I saw this tweet was like, one, this is fucking awesome, well done. And then the other one was this kind of ratio of how the funds are being divvied up between the different actors is relatively like right, kind of where I expected or where I would like it to be, right? And it just kind of validates the design and validates the economics, validates the mathematical aspects of the network to produce the end result purely on market dynamics, produce the end result that I think makes the most logical sense, which is pretty crazy to think.
Yeah, agreed. This was a great tweet. It's also interesting just because there's been like a lot of discussion about how can LPs be like extra, how can LPs be incentivized enough to like make sure there's deep liquidity and all that. And seeing this breakdown, it's like, oh damn, like it already is. Like everything is kind of already weighted in a way that makes sense for everything to like balance out.
What we should do, Kyle, now that I'm thinking about it, is like we display to savers and to LPs like what the yield is, blah blah blah. But maybe it makes sense to display like what is the relative yield between LPs and savers, right? As a way of like expressing to them to a regular LP that like you're getting more yield than they are, and here's how much it is, blah blah blah.
Yeah, that's actually a good idea. Like some kind of metric that's just like a, you know how like we have the pool share the pool share ratio for the incentive pendulum. Yeah. So that's how I calculated this, and it's only available in like one spot. Like it's not easy to find if you don't like know where to look. So like I think maybe working with some of the UIs and like servicing some of these metrics might be a good idea. Like I might talk to THORswap about like getting this up there, because I mean it might need to be available in Midgard first and all the data sources, but like I don't think it'd be pretty easy to
we can add it to like we can add it to like THORnode or Midgard to make it easier for the UIs, and we can call it like the LP premium or something like this, or I don't know, maybe that's the wrong term to use, but something just to convey to people this, because it's really, because yield, as we all know, fucking going off of yield is just like really problematic for a whole host of reasons. It's always just kind of misleading in one form or another, either misleadingly high or misleadingly low. And this is actually more like a real kind of thing to look at.
Yeah, but I think the hardest part to convey is like what actually happens in the reality of holding an LP position, because that yield is kind of assuming the prices stay flat, right? Whereas really LPing is like this complicated thing where prices are moving, you're like rebalancing constantly. So it's like a much more sophisticated investor, or somebody that really understands what they're going to. Like you can't just have people see like 58% or 10%. Click the higher one. Like that's actually like that's that's going to steer a lot of people the wrong way, because like you can you can perform worse if like the assets like it's a strategy, right? So people have to
Right.
understand that. Yeah, of
Right.
course.
And you're right. It is kind of complicated to be an LP. There's a lot of like moving parts in a sense. And that was one of the motivations to build Savers was just to have a very simple thing that people could like, you don't need to understand a lot. You can, it's cognitively low load in a sense to understand Savers, and you can just get some yield, and it's simple, and you don't, have to be a fucking math expert in a sense.
Yeah, exactly. It's just too hard to put the LP yield into one metric, you know? Like there's no one metric that can just say like this is what the yield is because it's like, yeah, I mean, you earn this, but then you also take on IL risk and then you take on the IL risk of the savers or which can be either positive or negative. So it's like there's so many moving parts. It just can't be captured in one metric, which is why like I advocated for moving away from the Luby based thing because it's just so confusing towards users. So I think it's important. Obviously, it's important for LPs to understand like what risks they're taking, but at the same time, like it doesn't really properly capture like the revenue that they bring in from fees,
Yeah.
which is a lot. And the reason I even looked into this in the first place because on THORchain.net on the homepage, it kind of shows how much LPs and nodes are bringing in on a daily basis. And LPs, I mean, this is as a whole, not any individual pool, but like every day for the past like like every day since October or something, uh, LPs have been earning like 150K a day or something, like a pretty big amount, and nodes
Yeah. Yeah.
comparatively less. So I was like trying to see what like how is this actually breaking down? Because I see people complain about like LP rewards, and like obviously when they don't gain the value, that's because of the IL and Savers IL and things. But I was like, how much are they actually bring in? And it's quite a bit in just like pure earnings, which obviously has to offset the risk of IL and things to
Yeah.
make it worth it to LP.
Yeah, if I was looking back now, like I didn't thinking much about it in the beginning because LPing was kind of already established in the industry in some sense. But like if I was going to build a UI that does LPing, or whatever, kind of like a throw shop or whatever, I think I wouldn't give you like an overall yield. I would just say like, here's what you've made in fees, here's what you've lost from IL, like, and then have two different graphs kind of showing over time these two things. And so you'll see that the fees is constantly going up and to the right because it's only additive, right? It's adding more and more value and fees that you're collecting. And the second one's going to go up and it's going to go down. It's going to go up and down. It's going to fluctuate one direction or the other based upon market conditions and prices moving and that kind of stuff. And then the third one you can add in if you want to be extra about it is just like the monetary value, like a dollar form and how that's shifted over time of your position, right?
Is it okay for me to speak up real quick?
Hey, go ahead.
Go for it. What's up?
So I had a suggestion for perhaps a new way to think about APR. I think Luvi is actually a good idea, but the issue now is that it's just looking at such a small slice of time. I don't know how computationally expensive this would be, but like theoretically, we can measure every LP position in a given pool, right? And so then you can just use the Luvi metric on each position and then do a weighted average of those positions over, like, say, the last 30 days. And then that is a good representation of how that pool is doing. Because even if LPs are making good fees from swaps, I think what you're hearing from the community is I think a lot of people's LP positions is the yield from the swaps are getting eaten up by IL and then the IL to the cents and the savers. And so that was just my idea of perhaps a metric that better tracks the actual performance of the pool for the LPs.
Yeah, I mean that's something like that would be possible. It would be probably fairly computationally expensive because they'd probably just calculate once per day, looking at all the current LPs of the network and what their statuses are and that kind of stuff. The problem is that Luvi itself is a little bit is problematic because synthetics exist, because synthetics kind of play with the math of an AMM. Um, you can have a negative Luvi and it's legitimate, whereas if you don't have synthetics and you have Luvi, it'll should never go negative unless there's something wrong with the math of the AMM itself. So I think if we were to get rid of synthetics one day, like hypothetically into the future or whatever, if we just decide to remove it for whatever reason, then that would be much more practical. But until then, the synthetics would probably fuck with the numbers and wouldn't be as like aligned to reality.
Well, but my understanding is, I mean, Luby isn't fucking with the numbers, but due to the way synths can enter and exit, and it's like LPs are losing. Like, I mean, they're in the Luby calculation subthread in the THORChain Jev channel on Discord. Multi-parity, when he looked at a theoretical Bitcoin rune LP position from like last January to this past January. So a 1 year Rune LP position, and Bitcoin or Rune outperformed Bitcoin by like 55%. And still that LP position lost 2% compared to HODL. And like, if you're LPing for a year and Rune is outperforming Bitcoin and you're still losing money compared to holding, then there's no incentive to LP instead of holding. And I think that's dangerous for the network.
Well, that's the thing with that's the thing about THORChain, man. That's about AMMs in general, whether you're talking about Uniswap or any other hundred that exists. If you are LPing in a pool where in some time span, the yield that you generate in 1 year, let's just say, is less than the price movements of between asset A and asset B, then yeah, you will be like a -2% to use your number. THORChain is a little bit what makes us unique rather than relative to a Uniswap or somebody else, Osmosis or whatever, is that because of our slip-based fee model, it's much more effective in the sense that it produces more fees than a Uniswap would with the same amount of volume or whatever. So we are better positioned than most AMMs in this space, but we're not impervious to the results of one asset outperforming or underperforming the other in an AMM pool. That makes sense?
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry. Thank you for taking my question. That all checks out.
Yeah.
Also, Boone, great thread on lending. Well written thread. Everyone should give you a follow and keep the post coming.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Chuma. You there?
Juma.
Chuma.
Hi.
Hello.
How's it going?
Doing good. What's up?
Caught me off guard. I didn't request to speak.
Oh,
You did, but
Oh,
it's all right. You probably just did it by accident.
sorry
No
about
worries.
that.
no worries.
Okay.
Let's see.
The other thing
Lending.
that happened was the 200% CR change that we had.
Yes, sir. So lending ADR 12 has started to be enacted. So that means that CRs are for lending are 200%. You can get a loan with 50% LTV and any THORChain interface, which is awesome. And it's live right now. So the 60 million rune of the 60 million uncirculating rune burn, it didn't happen yet. That'll happen on the next Thornode update. I think it's version 128. So I would expect that probably sometime next week, or so, like sometime in that order. But there's still space in lending, so it really doesn't make a difference whether if you want to take out a loan now or later. All that burn does is create more room for the lending protocol. It's not a burn of circulating supply. So ADR 12 is already effectively enacted, and then that rune burn will take place and create even more room for lending. And it's a ton of room. I think it creates somewhere between 20 and 30 million rune of space, which is like somewhere around 100 million in space for lending as a whole. So it's going to be a ton of space for the lending protocol at a flat 200% CR, 50% LTV. So Yeah, pretty awesome. We're pretty excited about that. What are you guys' thoughts?
Well, yeah, one of the fun things was to watch happen, and I suspected this. I think we expected this was like going to happen, but it was you weren't sure what the numbers going to like kind of end up being in reality. Was that the idea that like a lot of people who open up their loans at like a 300% CR or 350 or whatever the hell the number was, like they can now close their loans and then reopen it and then get a higher debt, like, which is a much better deal for them, right? Which is great. We actually want that activity, more trading, more swaps, more interaction with the network, and also kind of upgrades all those loans to be into a safer state, right? Safer for the protocol. So I was curious to know, like, how, what would that look like? Would there be like a mass exodus and then a mass reentry on day one, or like how much of that would, how many people would withdraw and then like come back in, blah blah blah. And in reality, I think we went from like 90% or 95, I think it was like 90% full, and then we withdrew down to around 60%. So we lost like 30% before made the change to 200% CR, which was so people were doing this like preemptively, which was kind of fascinating. And then once we set the 200% CR, people started to like enter in. You can see like a graph of like this kind of up and to the right kind of graph of like all the people kind of re-entering and more loans being open. And so we've gone from like in the last few days, gone from like 60% cap capacity of the cap to I think we're now at like 84 or 85%, right? So we're almost back to where we were before we did the CR change after a few days, which is kind of cool. And by the way, that also means that the amount of loans that entered and came back um, is not 1 to 1. It's kind of more. It's probably more closely like 1 to 1.5 or maybe 2, depending upon some things. Because when you close a loan at 300% CR with a lower debt, in the end, you're gonna like you're gonna use up less of the cap space when you come back in, right? Because the net buy and burn on the network will be less when you come back in. So when we go from 60% and then back up to where we were before, that's not like a 1 to 1, like, oh, everybody left and then everybody came back in. Technically, that's not correct. It would be everybody left and then they all came back in, plus some more capital came back in, whatever amount that might be. So we did see an engagement so far, and obviously it's early. Like it's only been like a few days, obviously, but we've seen a lot of people leave and then come back in, paying fees to do so, getting a better deal for them, but also safer for the protocol at the same time. And the utilization of that cap is almost back to where it was. So the benefit of the protocol has been basically the same as it was before, but now it's safer because it's 200% CR. But the cap that we've been using is almost the same as it was, even just after a few days. And it kind of proves what my thesis was, or what my hope was, that when we went to a 200% CR, the increased demand in lending will make up for the losses of each individual loan getting like a less of a value from the protocol's perspective. And then we're at the net result is all the borrowers are happy because they're just getting a better deal, right? There's no real downside from their perspective, really. And for us, we're still getting all the benefit that we want to get. We also got a bunch of loans closing and opening, which caused a lot of swaps to occur and fees to be generated, right, and trade volume to increase for those last few days, which is good. And so like I felt very good kind of seeing that kind of validation in the market, right? And then also, what did you take it even a step further? Like in this scenario, like let's just say um, uh, Bitcoin's pumping, right? And it's doing very well. Rune's like stationary or whatever. There was a kind of a concern that some people had, even within like the devs, of like, people are going to close their loans, they're going to take profits, they're going to blah blah blah, which some people will definitely for sure do that. But the activity we've now seen is that people are also keen to like just improve the quality of their debt. They're keen to close and renew, and they're open to paying the fees to do so, and they'll get the higher debt and get more money in their pocket, instead of like just dumping the situation and like selling the Bitcoin or whatever. So it shows that there's an interest in that kind of activity and within the community itself, which is a kind of a validating signal that we saw the last few days. In general, I was very kind of bullish on what I saw.
Yeah, one thing to keep in mind, I think, with lending is so with all the activity, a lot of people opening and closing. I think there was a bad band thread. He said that it's the biggest couple days of THORChain lending. I think a couple million in loans being opened and closed per day. That the derived asset pool depths have been shrinking because that's the way they're designed. When there's a lot of lending activity, those pools contract, and that means there's more slippage going in and out. And it also kind of nerfs streaming swaps. As the derived pool depths shrink, there's less streams you can do. So and there's, remember, when you take out a loan, it's something like 4 swaps to get to the to get your debt out, right? So without streaming at all, just make sure you're checking your slippage before taking out a loan. And if slippage is bad, that means it's better to just wait. It's flat 200% CR, so there's really no benefit to taking out a loan now or later, besides just like the general price of Bitcoin. So like just keep in mind that the derived depths really shrink in high activity, and if you're trying to take out a big loan, especially, then or repay, then it might be best to just wait if you're experiencing a lot of slippage.
Was that because a lot of people were closing loans, or does just opening loans also shrink the depth?
Both do it, because anytime it's not the opening and closing loans that cause the derived asset pool directly to shrink. It's just the swapping of the layer one pools themselves. And because more loans are being opened and closed, it's just more swapping of the layer one pools inherently so. And in particularly the stablecoin pool, the Tor pool, it's a lot more shallow relative to Bitcoin. At least it was before. We actually added some new anchors to the pool to make it even more deep, to deepen it even further. But it is, relatively speaking to Bitcoin, for example, it is considerably more shallow, but it's getting half the trade volume of Bitcoin, right? And so it's just natural, and it's whether you're doing Bitcoin or Ethereum, they're both trading with like the stable coins in the sense of like doing the Tor stuff. So it's just like it's just that activity just kind of caused specifically the Tor pool to fall quite sharply, to a low depth. It should recover on its own eventually, and we'll keep an eye on it, of course. But yeah, it's an interesting result.
Yeah, two stablecoin pools were added. So we lost BUSD the other month because that's obviously being deprecated by Binance and Paxos. So that's not really a thing anymore, and that was a really deep stablecoin pool. But we do have two new stablecoin pools that are in the Tor anchors now. So that's USDC on AVAX and also on Binance Smart Chain. So I also believe that means both of those should be open for savers as well. So those are just open Tor anchors now, so those will both add to the depths of the Tor anchor, hopefully. Brought up Paradox Prince. What's up?
Hey guys, nice meeting you all. I actually was a first-time lender today on THORChain via Shapeshift. I missed the first boat because the CR fell, so thank you for bringing it back to 200%. One of the things that I just want to say as a proposition to Chad, my expertise are options, and I'm not the first one that actually mentioned the similarity between this lending and the in the money options. And I actually opened the loan to hedge some of the options positions, but I think THORChain might be in the future in a great position to be the first decentralized options protocol with native Bitcoin by actually mimicking or utilizing a very similar model to what they are doing on lending. So just an idea, and writing options could also help fix the impermanent loss of the LPers if they, for example, decide to provide at the same time liquidity for both options, writing options and swaps. That's about it.
Yeah, I'm open to exploring those kind of concepts and ideas. In general, I'm kind of open to exploring kind of more professional trader kind of tools, and the first one we're talking about is limit orders for order books, which is kind of the most simplest and probably the most heavily used like pro trading kind of like mechanism. We're also talked about like perpetuals and like leverage in that sense. We can talk about options like you're saying as well. Like we could take a look at other kind of ideas, primitives we see used in like the pro trading circles of crypto to kind of create like Bitcoin native perpetuals and Bitcoin native limit orders and Bitcoin native options, and which, as you pointed out, lending is in effect like a put option, right? And so there's a lot of possibilities there, and there's a lot of capital that can be in activity and usage that we can kind of like pull on and to get more utilization of our network and utilization of our pools. Like you have to remember, like almost everything we do is just focuses trade volume through the pools in one form or another. So I'm totally open to exploring those things into the future with the rest of the community.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Oh, looking forward to it.
Kenton, what's up, man?
Hey guys, good. Congrats on episode 83. These are fantastic, guys. I don't always tune in, but I always listen to the recordings. So thanks for doing them.
Thanks, man.
Yeah. I thought I'd go over my reasonings for kind of why I'm against lending. This concept of innovation has come up as kind of an excuse to justify it. And I get that. We're all in, that's why we're all here. But just like, adding a new chain to trade comes with some risk. Maybe it's not worth it. That we're not going to get the trading volume from it. It increases the attack surface, all that kind of stuff, right? So maybe it's not worth it. And I think that's just, the people who are maybe kind of against lending, they don't see it worth the risk. And to me, the risk is, how does it unwind? And I'm kind of curious if everybody who's in favor and support of lending, are they going to hold their rune through the next cycle? Or is this just kind of a degen way to pump the price, and then everyone's going to exit? I don't know, and I kind of I'm hearing from people that's how they're going to trade it. So that's my concern is how does lending unwind? And I don't think any of us, we truly don't know, right? There's no really way to know until it happens. So, for me personally, my interest, or the reason I'm against lending, is just because I'm interested in the long-term survivability of the protocol. So that's it. It's not about being against innovation. I just have a couple more comments too here.
Let's deal with those first comments first before we go into
sure.
Add more comments. In general, I wouldn't use the term innovation as an excuse. Innovation is an important part of like this industry, and it's what we need to do in order to move forward and build more powerful, more flexible, more valid systems. In a sense, you have to try things to know what works and what doesn't, in a matter of speaking. And the other thing I would push against is like I would not consider lending to be a degen thing. To be honest with you, I consider it to be quite the opposite. Like to me, our lending model is the least degen lending model out there, just because the use cases of why you would use this lending is to not necessarily degen, to like lever up yourself on like 3x long. I mean, you can if you want to. It's you can use it for that case if you want to, but where it really thrives or where it's really kind of adds value to people and societies is not for degens to like leverage position themselves, but rather to allow people to like buy a car or go on a vacation. Like my sister was actually talking to me. I was spending some time with her in LA recently, and she was thinking about using our system, our lending protocol, to be able to take a loan and acquire a new car for herself, right? And she was interested in that because she had to worry about interest rates ballooning up to crazy amounts or losing all of her Bitcoin in a friggin' liquidation scenario or all this kind of stuff. So I actually consider this to be like, it is an experimental concept in terms of mechanisms and how it works. Totally agree with you on that. I'm not denying that. But what I'm saying is that the product itself is pretty anti-degen in my view. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. And I do believe that's your intention. But But at the same time, none of us can control how people use it, right? And there's, it's not going to take long for people to figure out they can 2x long their Bitcoin and Ethereum. And so, in my opinion, that'll be the majority of people using it. And so they're going to look to unwind that trade near the top or, as the next bear market starts. And, not when they're trying to pay back a car several years from now. But I mean, neither me nor you we don't know how it's going to be used, right?
Right.
So, okay, and this is another thing too. In Discord, somebody asked,
Well,
isn't this the same way?
Before you go on to a new point, let me just address one more thing you said.
Sure.
The other thing you said was like, how does that unwind? Right. That was kind of one of the topics you brought up.
Yeah.
Which is a very valid and a very good question to ask. Right. It's a very, very valid thing to have a topic about. So it unwinds in the same sense of how it spins up. Right. The question is, can it unwind back to zero? Absolutely can. 100% would be perfectly fine. I'm not worried about unwinding back to zero. Like if we wanted to kill lending tomorrow, say we just said we're not going to do it anymore. Community voted, we're going to get rid of lending, blah blah blah, whatever. If we make the choice to do so, that's actually, to me, not a problem. Yes, we'll mint some room to do it, but we burnt the room to get there to begin with. It kind of equates itself out. The problem comes into place is when you unwind it at a high rate of you just rush fucking unwind it. You know what I mean? Like there's a bank run of some kind, or we're telling people you got 1 week to unwind your loan, or you're not getting it back at all, blah blah blah, or whatever. We wouldn't do that, of course. Like that. I mean, I wouldn't advocate for that for sure. And unwinding by itself to me is not necessarily a problematic thing, right? But I would also say that that the number of loans that will unwind, even in the scenario where we're actually going to shut it down or whatever, the number of loans that will wind down will not be 100%. I will guarantee you fucking right now that it will not be 100%. That is the case almost every blockchain in the freaking history. You can literally go to Bitcoin's blockchain, see how many UTXOs have been older than 10 years old. And a lot of those, probably even a majority of those are lost Bitcoin. Do you know what I mean? We will always have some amount, even within BlockFi, even within Anchor, you almost never get a situation where 100% of those loans will be closed, even in this scenario where you're trying to fucking close it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So even if we did do it, we'll have an additional buffer, because I don't want to throw out a number because I have no basis to say any real number, to be honest, and I don't want to mislead the community. But I'm not concerned about that particular scenario. What I am concerned about is some sort of bank run fucking scenario where somebody, the community just rush exits to the door, and there's mechanisms in the code to protect us from that, right? With the virtual depth, which we just saw kind of happening in the last few days, right? With all the increased activity, all that kind of stuff, right? The question is, if we decide to actually end it because we saw some signals or whatever happened that convinced us that this lending doesn't make sense in the long term, when we make the choice to end it, we're not going to pay people's debts back off for them, because that would be, why would us, the community or the treasury, pay money to mint a bunch of room? That's just fairly silly. And what will happen is people will just kind of end it on their own time. And one thing we've learned by looking at the loans so far, and obviously it's only been 6-7 months, whatever, is they've been incredibly sticky. They open, they don't really close that quickly at all. And so if we were to end it, people would end over multi-month, most likely multi-year time frame. And I don't mind that at all. That kind of slow burn of the feature to back to closer to zero doesn't have significant effects on the price, doesn't have significant effects, on the protocol itself as a whole. To me, that's not too much of a concern. The only time it's a concern to me is when there's some sort of rush to do so. And if we're closing it down as a protocol, we're not going to tell people to rush immediately, because that would be bad for the protocol. It's take your time, come back when you want to, and close your loan when you have the money, or whatever happens. The thing that's important is to make sure that people don't run for the exits.
I agree. I'm not worried about a death spiral, because when you have a bank run, there's no friction on withdraw, right? Like with Silvergate Bank and Silicon Valley, people could just wire their money out in one day, right? There's no cost to do it, and that's how they collapse.
Yeah.
With lending, you got to pay back your loan, right? That's friction. They come up with the catch to pay it back. And I understand the virtual pools. I get that. So I'm not worried about a death spiral. I'm more worried about like a slow spiral, over the course of a year or two, just this constant grind of inflation driving the rune price down.
But then you would have the inverse would have to be true as well. We've had a constant growth of rune being burnt, blah, 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 to open up all these loans. And now we're just having the inverse also happening in a slow roll back down. And if that's the case, it's basically like, I wouldn't call it neutral because it depends upon circumstances, blah, blah, blah. But like more or less, it's basically neutral. We tried it. We got benefit. Didn't work out so well. We got the spiral back down, the slow spiral, if you want to call it that. And it's just slow spiral up, slow spiral down. It's more or less, neutral.
Well, then let's follow along with what you're saying. We just come back to where we started, which is kind of my point. This is going to be one giant round trip.
Yeah, but if we're back where we started, then no harm, no foul in a sense. Do you know what I mean?
Sure. Then what about the people who ride it up and then, okay, well, I don't want to go back down and they want to sell. So let's look at rune holders selling, front running this.
I mean, maybe to me, like a slow spiral up and a slow spiral down, like that kind of long-term buying or burning a rune. I don't know how much of effect that has on market psychology. I'm not a fucking trading market psychology expert, to be honest with you. But I would say is that like if it's slow spiral up, slow down, and it's more or less neutral in terms of difference of those things, the value of what it is we're trying to achieve in terms of the protocol and how it's different from everything else is incredibly fucking powerful. Like THORChain should fucking win a Nobel Prize if this thing works the way I think it's gonna work. Right, like this project should fucking win a Nobel Prize for this shit because like we just fundamentally changed loans forever. Right, even within the DeFi space, to offer something incredibly powerful and useful for the entire market to use. That's pretty interesting, and that's to me worth the slow spiral up and the slow spiral down and have that neutrality.
I don't disagree with you on the innovation of THORChain. It's pretty awesome. Okay, let's look at another scenario. Let's say nobody's redeeming loans.
Yeah.
And there's this huge and the liability, but so I understand if nobody redeems a loan, it's the best thing for THORChain. However, the liability still stays. It still stands. And as nodes, any other rune holder looks at this liability growing, everyone's going to watch the rune to Bitcoin ratio. Where are we at in the cycle? And they might look to front run that. They're like, we're not even going to wait around to see anybody redeem. We're just going to sit on the sidelines. And instead of having a bank run on loans being redeemed, what if we have a run on rune being sold? And say nodes are pulling out, they're selling their rune, the network becomes underbonded. And basically just like what we saw with, let me finish that. Network's underbonded. We're going into bear market. Trading volumes are going down. The yield is down. The pools reach their cap. The rune price fundamentally can't go up. We're kind of stuck. And as the rune price keeps going down, that's increasing the liability. No one's redeeming, but the potential liability keeps increasing, and this is exasperating the rune price going down. Thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, the effect of the rune price is relative to the liquidity of the asset and the amount of liquidity passing through it on per day or per week or whatever time frame you want to pick, right? So in our case, like last time I looked, I haven't looked in a while, so forgive me if these numbers are off, but last time I looked, like the trade volume of THORChain is like, I can't remember if it's 200 million or 200 rune or something like this, but it's a lot. Either one of those numbers are pretty large. We're like we're like the top 30 largest traded assets in crypto, like or something like this. We're pretty large. There's a lot of liquidity. And if we're going to sell off, the amount of rune that would need to mint back, the net like mint, which right now is in the current moment is probably like probably close to, like, I'm guessing, I haven't looked at, I don't have the thing in front of me, but I'm going to guess it's around 2 million, something like this. 2 million within the context of 200 million isn't, going to really push the price significantly one direction or the other, right? Now we're going to 5x. We're going to go from the current situation, which, we're going to burn the 60 million standby. we're going to increase it by 5x. Obviously, 5x is a lot larger than 1x, right? So the larger we get, that this plays more into your thought, your thinking, your thought process plays more into the effect of this. At a 1x, or even at a 25 million rune out of the supply, 500 million, whatever it is, it's like 5%. It's not going to break the bank really, like in one direction or the other. We're just trying to collect data, collect metrics, collect market behaviors to understand how people react and interact with the system before we like go for fucking broke, in a matter of speaking. Forgive my phrase there, but so at this stage, I'm not really worried about what you're worried about. If we get to a place where like there's no caps on lending and lending scales from 5% to like something larger, I don't know, I'm going to say 50%, I don't know, whatever it is. Then your thought process is a little bit different, because the amount of rune as a percentage of the supply, or a percentage of the trade volume per day or per week, per month, whatever, is much more significant. They're much more, it's a smaller ratio between the two of those things. So then what you're concerned about has more validity to it. But I would argue that in this particular moment and of the caps where they are, not really too worried about it.
I agree with you in a moment. Absolutely. Yeah, I am talking about like an uncapped scenario. Basically, if we're gonna grow let lending grow to a point where it can positively impact the price, conversely, it can negatively impact the price, right? And as far as I'm concerned, that's the ultimate goal, right? We want to, we're expanding the caps lending right now, see how it goes, then we're going to expand them again, right? Eventually, that's the goal, is to have this positively impact the price. So that's I'm not talking about right now, this right out second.
But
I mean,
I would also,
end
say that like, each time we discuss the idea of increasing the caps, we will have more data than we did the previous time, right? We'll have more information, we'll have more data collection, we'll have we'll have more market scenarios that shown themselves where tokens had gone up or down or whatever, right? Rune had a bad fucking day where it went down 15% in a day or something like this. Like, we'll have more of these scenarios. So when we make the choice to increase the caps to go larger, we're more confident, and we're more secure about the design, more secure about what it is we're trying to do, and the odds are less likely that we'll wind it back down to zero, because we're making more and more informed choices and informed decisions as we go up the scale. So the likelihood of us scaling it down to zero, in my opinion, is less likely the higher the caps get than it is when the caps are lower.
Exactly. Now that's why I was against. That's exactly my position. That's because I know the more we expand it, the more down the road we are, more likely it'll continue. Have you guys thought about?
I'm saying we're likely to continue, not because we're just kind of degenning or YOLOing our way up the fucking scale, but we're likely to continue. Like, we're less likely to do so because we're more informed and we have more information, and we're making educated and informed choices about what's positive for the protocol.
Okay, fair. Yep. Have you guys thought about like waiting a full cycle, bull to bear, before trying to max out the caps and lending?
Yeah.
Or is the goal to try and uncap it before the bull type thing, or before the bull ends or something?
I'll speak for myself. I'm not speaking for anybody else here. My viewpoint is this: is that I want to do the 60 million rune burn thing. I want to give that some period of time. I don't know how much. We'll just maybe, I don't know, 6 months. I'm throwing a random number there, but give that time to see how the market reacts. We may want to throw in like 150% CR at some point during that process, just to kind of see, if we like go above and beyond what everybody else in the market is doing, like Compound, Aave, so forth and so on, Alchemy, whatever. We give them, the people, a much better deal than we can, and every attribute in that respect, than what they're currently getting. How much can we kind of pull from Compound and Aave to influx it to us? But I don't think beyond that point of that 60 million, like, at least in my personal opinion, is not to go ahead and burn more rune, like as we did in this current moment. My personal viewpoint is that we can implement the derived asset cap, right? Which means that we can, with the derived asset cap, we can be much more safe about scaling up further, because it's not, we're not going to mint Rune beyond the 500. We're never going to mint Rune 500 even now, but we wouldn't mint it into the reserve, right? And take 10, 30, 40, 50 million Rune from reserve and put more risk on the protocol. And so because of that, I feel a little bit more confident, more secure in scaling it above that point. And to be honest, like after we go through the whole cycle and we've seen the bull, we've seen the bear, we've seen how it fares and the ups and the downs and everything like that, and we have the full breadth of information to then make a really informed choice, assuming that everything goes the way that I think, that I hope that it goes, then we can just remove that fucking cap. And then we can actually really tick it off, because now that it's like, now that we've proven that lending works in the way that it's supposed to, that it's designed to work, we don't even need that necessarily, that cap necessarily anymore. Other than if you want to protect against like a heavy scenario or a top heavy scenario, or the derived assets is worth more than the Rune asset itself. The market cap of the derived assets is higher, or a large percentage of the market cap itself of Rune. Other than that, kind of like that cap right there, we can remove the cap of the derived asset, because we know that lending is working at that point, right? And we can take away any concerns that a borrower may have, like, oh, I may get, partial of my collateral back because the room price is down relative to my Bitcoin or whatever the fuck it is. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that'd be cool. That'd be great to go through a full cycle before maxing out the caps. That makes sense. Okay, I just have a couple other kind of points, just kind of things I've jotted down I want to kind of bring up. So in Discord, somebody asked, isn't this the way BlockFi, THOReau's Capital, and FTX collapsed? And then somebody else replied saying, no, it's because there's no transparency and they're rehypothecating. And I got to push back on that a bit. The transparency of a trade has zero bearing on its risk of failing.
Well, so that's not what they're arguing, though.
Well, and rehypothecation.
It's not the transparency of the trade. It's the transparency of what's happening with that Bitcoin.
Yeah.
In BlockFi's case, and in FTX's case, they would just take that Bitcoin and they would just use it somewhere else in some sort of like gambling-ish, scenario or situation or whatever, and they just lost a lot of fucking money.
But it was the gambling and the bet they were making the reason they lost it. It wasn't because they kept it secret. They could have very well done a prudent trade and done something smart with it and been just fine.
No, it was kept secret. We didn't know what the fuck they were doing with that. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. And then rehypothecation. This THORChain's lending design is literally the definition of rehypothecation. It's a practice where custodians, such as banks, use assets that have been posted to them as collateral for their own financial gain, such as borrowing money or making other investments. So THORChain is taking collateral and selling it to make their own investment into Rune. So this lending design is rehypothecation. And this is exactly how these other firms collapsed, and even in TradFi, we're basically shorting Bitcoin. And we're going long the Rune Bitcoin ratio. Well, THOReau Capital, they were long the GBTC Bitcoin ratio, and went against them. But at the end of the day, we're shorting Bitcoin. Is basically what we're doing. And could you imagine a TradFi bank shorting Bitcoin? People would mock it. They laugh at it. And I'm getting this from investors, right? I'm out there. I'm trying to sell this to you guys. I'm talking to retail, to institutional. They're crypto savvy, they're normies, and everything in between. And I bring up lending, and it's just it's a boner killer. So like, what are you guys doing? That doesn't make any sense. Why would you want to short Bitcoin like that? So this, it's not. I'm speaking from what I'm hearing. I'm hearing the market tell me, and I'm relaying this to you guys. That this is the way people like. I've met 2 institutional investors already own Rune. And they're like, oh yeah, Luna 2.0. Like, this is how they're already viewing it and trading it. So, it's, at the end of the day, this design, we're shorting Bitcoin. And that's eventually what all Rune holders will be down the road. And it's going to be a question as a Rune holder or a new Rune investor, do you want to buy into a bank that's short Bitcoin? And I don't think a lot of people are going to want to say yes to that. So it's going to limit the demand for people that want to own and invest in Rune.
Yeah. Okay. So, a couple things. When people are opening up loans, the protocol is using that capital to drive as much value into itself as possible, right? That's why it's doing it, right? If we were just to take a loan, if we were to do lending in the typical sense, right, of compound Ave, where it's over collateralized and it's liquidations and all this kind of stuff, it wouldn't really drive any purpose or value into the protocol. At least not that I can think of off the top of my head. At least not in any kind of significant way. You know what I mean? And so lending here is trying to provide a really significant value to the protocol itself, and significant value to swappers, and significant value to Rune holders. Now, if you want to label that as rehypothecation, okay, sure, you can apply that label if you want to, right? But that's what any bank does in any scenario, in TradFi or elsewhere. When you get capital from some ex person, you utilize that capital to be able to drive value into yourself, into your bank, into your thing, or whatever, right? Everybody's doing that. So if you want to say that THORChain is doing something wrong because it does the same thing as like every other fucking market in the world, okay, and I find that a little bit odd, right? But
well, hold on a sec, chat. I didn't say THORChain is doing something wrong. I'm just correcting a comment in Discord saying this is not rehypothecation. It is, and I agree with you. It's what all banks do, and it's done properly. It's a fine practice. There's nothing wrong with it. It's TradFi's been doing it for a century. I get that, but the question always remains is, well, what is that trade? What are you doing when you're rehypothecating? And when these firms blow up, it's because they're making crazy trades with other people's assets.
Right.
And I'm just trying to highlight we're shorting Bitcoin, and that's hasn't worked out well over the
network. From the network's position, it's not necessarily shorting Bitcoin. It's trying to use Bitcoin to drive as much value into itself as possible, and by doing so, the Rune price inherently, not inherently, I shouldn't say that. By doing so, the Rune price, is affected by the mass, loans are being opened theoretically at one point in the future, right? It's not so much the network is like trying to short Bitcoin in a sense. It's just it knows that it has capital that is exogenous to itself, and it want to utilize that capital to drive value into itself, meaning the Rune asset in that particular case.
Right? Yeah, it's half the trade. We're shorting Bitcoin and we're longing Rune. That's the trade. And so as long as the Rune to Bitcoin ratio cooperates, we're good. We're fine. We're dandy. As soon as it goes against us, like that's the question mark, right? That's where we don't know.
That question mark, I feel more confident about saying. You saying you don't know, I mean, that's fine. For me, I don't say I don't know. And the reason, I can't say it with assurances. I can't say like, oh, it's 100%, blah, blah, blah. Obviously, I'm not going to say that. But what I can say is that every piece of data of historical, of Rune's history and outside of Rune's history, of crypto history, aligns to the viewpoint of where I stand on it. All the data fucking supports it. Like I don't. There's edge cases where you can point to like, oh, this in this particular case, in this particular coin, this particular moment, it doesn't. Of course, but like 90-something fucking percent of the time is completely aligned with where my personal viewpoint is. The thing that really kind of drives the point here about like when we think that Bitcoin will outperform Rune is really most likely going to be in the bear markets, right? That's where the danger is, right, of a net mint of Rune. And there's a whole series of reasoning of like bear markets are boring and nobody's really trading or opening loans or closing loans or doing fucking anything because like the whole market just falls asleep for a couple of years in a sense, right? And we talk about being a 200% or 150% LTV means that one of these loans won't even be closed. And even if when people do close it before it kind of reaches that kind of cusp, the amount of Rune that needs to be minted back is a lot less because it's not much net difference between those 2 points. Do you know what I mean? So there's a whole series of like factual, logical reasoning of why a bear market has less risk to the protocol than a bull market does. And we're lopsided to the bull side. We're asymmetric to the bull side. And we won't know this for certain until we've actually like gone up through a bull, gone up through a bear, which that's what we're doing, effectively now. But I personally have a high degree of confidence, not 100% certainty. You'll never hear me say that it goes in the direction we want it to go, because all of the historical data of Rune and other assets in the industry as a whole all support this.
Okay, so I'm going to push back on that a little bit too. Canceling ILP, I kind of view as like defaulting on a debt. That's part of the reason why I wanted to keep it, is it would remind us that, we got to pay off this liability, and before we take on new liabilities, be cautious, because it was underestimated that ILP would get a control like that. So we had to cancel it.
No. Oh, excuse me. That is not the case. It was not ILP got quote out of control. It's not that we had to cancel it because of blah blah blah. That's not the case at all. All right. The reason why ILP was canceled is because we provided something else called savers that allowed you to get yield without IL risk. And so the benefits of ILP to the protocol got significantly reduced, in a matter of speaking. Now, you can argue that the liability risk in the bear market got to 15, 17 million, I think was the highest at its point, which, by the way, was a lot fucking better than Bancor, who implemented a conceptually similar but different idea, where they fucking canceled the entire thing because more ILP was paid out in like 3 days than the entire fucking like 2-3 years before, like combined in a very short period of time, and fucked them over in a very significant way. For us, that was not the case. Did we pay a bunch of ILP out in the bear market? Absolutely do. I don't know the exact number off the top of my head. I'm going to guess it to be like 3 million, 4 million. I don't know that off the top of my head. I'm going to guess it to do that. Right? The liability got large, but the liability also went back down to zero, proving that the system actually did work. That liability, we expected liability to go high, and we expect liability to go not in the same way for loans. Loans are a little bit different because the liability actually decreases the further you go into a bear market. Once you hit a certain point of like a certain cusp. There's a reason why for that. I'm not going to go into it now because it's a different topic. But like the liability, we expect the liability to go high, but people didn't withdraw loans. I mean, and it did like some small amount, but overall people didn't, even though the yield at the time was quite low. Like LP yield was low. People had all the reason to fucking withdraw, and they still didn't fucking do it. And we didn't actually pay out like some massive, crazy, amount of Rune in the end. At least this is not my opinion. Maybe you have a different opinion on that. So the reason why we canceled is because we don't actually need ILP anymore. We already have a non-IL option. We have additional yield going to LPs to counteract the IL that the savers, the regular LPs are earning, right? And ILP went to basically zero. I think it was like sub 100,000, whatever the hell the number was. And it's like we got out of the situation without it collapsing to zero. We waited until everything was healthy and good state, proving that the entire system fucking worked to begin with. And then we said, we actually don't need this feature anymore.
Okay. And now with savers, I'm going to argue again, the liability is underestimated there, because now there's talk about negative interest rates, right? Savers was supposed to be a feature without impermanent loss. You don't have to worry about it. Well, now we've underestimated the leverage savers has in the pools, so we have to have negative interest rates. So this is where I'm going. Is it that it's fine? I'm just saying.
Let me answer that question.
It's impossible. Like all I'm trying to say is we're 0 for 2 now on estimating liability and leverage.
Oh, hold on there. 0 for 2.
Okay.
What collapse have we seen? What thing are you? What is the O? Like ILP actually worked. It did
I agree. It worked.
Yeah. It did great. And then it proved itself through a bear market to survive and do well. We could have kept it going if we really wanted to, but we just made the choice not to, because it's not worth the extra risk, because there's already a mechanism to deal with that. Now, savers is a little bit different, because in savers' case, we decided to later on add stable savers. And once we added stable savers, to me, that's a signal of a significant. We're making the choice to add more risk to the protocol than was originally talked about in the original design. And once we did that, we said, let's now, because we're adding more risk to the protocol, because we added stable savers, which had a 20x down in a bear market relative to the dollar. We need to make some sort of mechanism to better suit and take on this additional liability, or this additional risk that we're taking on with stable savers. And ever since we launched that feature, I've been talking publicly that we need to solve this problem at some point in time, so we don't get ourselves into a dangerous zone. Because I don't want to say overstep, but we added more risk without thinking through of the results of that. And I'm trying to talk for a while to convince the community that we need to do something. Now, maybe Maybe it's negative interest rates. Maybe it's the haircut idea, which we've been floating around. Maybe it's forced ejections. I have different ideas of which one I feel is better or worse. Any of them would suffice. Any of them would take away the risk from the protocol, and we wouldn't worry about in a bear market, savers, encompassing all the LPs and taking all their positions and whatnot.
Yeah, fair enough. But you hit the nail on the head. Added a feature without taking into account the risks. I think that's just the gist of. I'd say I'm assuming the way the minority feels about lending. We just don't know the risk yet. So if the idea is to kind of just go to this 25 million cap, write it out for the next full cycle, see how it goes, that would be fantastic. Then we genuinely would have enough data to decide should we uncap it. That'd be great. If anything I can say, that'd be a great compromise for, at least for me anyway, that is worried about lending in the long term. And just to be clear too, like I want to hold Rune for the next few decades. I view Rune as the ultimate, running nodes as the ultimate passive income play. It's, to me, Rune is like, we're going into the next phase of the technology adoption cycle, the S curve, where the majority of the population is going to come in, the normies are going to come in, and Rune is exactly what they're looking for. It's an easy sell. It's an ETF on crypto. They can earn yield on it. Even in the top 50 for them, that's going to be considered high risk, but it's what they're looking for. For me, with lending, it removes that. It makes it risky for them, and then for me, it forces me to sell at some point or to trade it. It turns Rune from an investment into a trade. And so, for me, speaking selfishly, I want to be lazy. I want to just buy and forget my Rune. Just keep it in nodes for the next few decades and collect yield. But now I'm like, you know what? This leverage and liability, I got to trade this. I got to keep an eye on it. I got to look to get out and sit on the sidelines for a year or two before getting back in. So that's my concern. That's why I'm bringing all this up.
And that's a valid concern to have, right? And I think your concern is one that other people share as well. Like, I'm not trying to dismiss what you're saying. Valid point, right? So nodes have already voted. We're gonna burn the 60 million. We'll watch lending over the next 6 months or whatever the time frame is, whatever it's going to be, and then one day we'll hit the caps again. At least I hope that's the case. And then the network will have to try to determine what they want to do. And in my opinion, if we're gonna go further beyond where we are now in terms of the caps, I'm this moment at least I'm open to changing or learning some new viewpoints or information. But is to change the cap system to have a derived asset cap, right? So that we protect the amount of net room that can exist, holistically, in the sense of it doesn't really matter. And then we create the incentives for people to leave when we want them to leave, to create the balance that we're trying to create, in a sense. So, and you can vote at that time with your dollars, or your room rather, and your nodes, or whatever it is you're doing, to vote against that or vote for it or whatever. But that's definitely going to be a worthwhile conversation to be had at that time, whenever that's going to be.
For sure. Awesome, Chad. I really appreciate you going over this with me, and I'll get off. Let somebody else talk.
You're welcome, Ken.
Cool. Yeah, thanks for coming on, Ken. And also, I mean, it is pretty early to be talking about completely uncapping lending and just going forward and just not YOLOing it, but just removing the training wheels off it, because it is a very new feature. And this is really the first foray into really scaling it that we're seeing. So there's a lot of data yet to be collected on this, and obviously things are being implemented in a very conservative way, where we already have this lending lever that only puts up a third of the total Rune cap into the amount that can be used as collateral for lending, and obviously raising the CR, or you know what I'm saying, but lowering the CR also does the same thing in removing risk from the protocol. And then of course, what Chad's saying about the derived asset cap, what that does, and that's something that I've been really looking into as a really nice feature for, well, I wouldn't really call it a safety mechanism for lending, and making it so that the borrowers are really taking on some of that that risk where they're not just like, well, if you're entering at an inopportune time for the protocol, then you can do that, but it's it wouldn't be advantageous to you. You might not get your full collateral back. So like just making more safety mechanisms and like really just validating the data that we're going to get over the next scaling period, which will probably take many months to get up to any kind of cap there, and just like validating that and see where it's going to go. It's like the most productive way to go forward. And of course, like we're always having the discussions about how to keep features safe and like not overscale the protocol on things like savers and lending, because obviously like I totally agree with you, Ken. Like I feel personally the same, where it's like, yeah, I just want to buy Rune and keep earning fees from all the trade volume going through the network, and people actually using it to do cool things. So totally in agreement with you there.
Yeah, I just want to say thanks to Ken for coming up and raising his viewpoints and ideas and having a good hearted conversation and debate on the topic. And I do appreciate doing that like in a space, because like it's hard to do that shit on Twitter and just 140 characters and whatnot. It's also hard to do it in Discord because there's like 12 people talking simultaneously, and it's just tricky in that sense. So I do appreciate doing it in a forum or a medium where you can really get like a really good conversation going.
Cool. Anyone else got questions? Want to send in any requests? Or you guys have any other topics in the meantime?
I guess so. The only other thing is, like this whole lending thing was brought about because the scaling of lending protocol is already kind of happening right now with the CR being lowered, and the standby reserve will be burned to the next Thor node version, and with that, we're also going to see trade accounts, trade assets. So that's something to look forward to in the near future, probably the next like 2 weeks or so, and then we'll see ARB starting to switch over to trade assets, which obviously it takes no fees to get in and out of trade assets, and they're twice as capital efficient. So that'll be a cool switch to see that moving from the current synthetic asset model, which uses dual liquidity, into the trade account model, which just uses extra space under the liquidity caps. So yeah, we kind of went into it a lot on the last space. So maybe people want to like learn more about trade accounts and trade assets. I would just go back and listen to the last one. But yeah, unless anyone has any questions or wants to talk about anything else.
Yeah, I don't think anything else I have to top of my mind, at least.
Cool. Oh yeah, and ETH Denver. I pinned up the event that we're going to do, the happy hour. That's we're doing at ETH Denver next week on the 29th. We're going to the Catbird Hotel rooftop from 5:30 to 8:30 Mountain Time, local time there in Denver. And so if anyone's going to be out in ETH Denver, then definitely just RSVP on the Luma, and let's get the community out there. There's already a ton of people that already signed up, a bunch of people from different protocols and wallets, and just like people that we know in the space. And like obviously it'd be great to have the THORChain community out there. We're gonna have some good food, music, and drinks and company, so it'll be a good time.
Yeah, I'll see you all there. Anybody showing up, I'll see you there as well, and we'll hang out and grab a beer, I guess, or whatever.
Yes, sir. All right, sounds good. Well, we'll call it here, and we'll see you guys next week in Denver. Peace.
There you guys.
See you guys.